Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. In this video, I'm going to talk about a new capability as it's not a new one, but it's a part of Microsoft modern security and which is a security essential for the cloud identity platforms, right? And also it supports the zero trust framework, right? So within the zero trust framework, this is the very important part of that as it has a lot of capabilities to make sure how user identities are being used, how those sign-ins are being actively used and evaluated, right? And you might have heard and seen and used continuous access evaluation, which is a part of conditional access policy within Microsoft 365 Entra ID ecosystem, right? And the another part of that is SSF, right? So what is SSF? Sign-in signal, right? And sign-in signal strength framework, right? So that's the one of the capability that I'm going to talk about. So these are the two capabilities which works together hand in hand to make sure how the sign-in strength as well as signals are being passed and transferred between Entra ID and then the client. Client includes the applications, identity, device, right? And all other access levels from wherever the user is trying to access any applications, any service, any data, any files, any documents, and everything together, be it managed device, be it unmanaged device, or whatever it is, right? So it's going to manage all of that as well as it is going to keep evaluation as well. So evaluation is going to happen between devices and then access tokens by using continuous access evaluation, right? And then that is going to be used, right? So let's go ahead and talk more on that, right? So let me share my screen quickly here and I'll just show you how it works and what are the key points, right? So I have just prepared a small PPT presentation and that's going to be very small and short, right? Because this topic is very important and this is going to be very straightforward as well, right? So let me just open it up here quickly and I will simply just it's okay. Let me share my screen here. Seems that was not shared yet. All right. So you might have seen this, or let me go on presentation mode here. All right. So what is the SSF and CAPE in the identity and access management context? And as I said, it's a modern security essentials in the cloud identity platforms. And probably it might be used in the different identity solutions apart from Microsoft, right? Because I haven't seen and haven't used other identity solutions. So probably it is going to be there as well and is going to be used. But so far in the Microsoft cloud identity platforms, it is being integrated and SSF is the one thing which is going to be matched more enough than the current state because there are a lot many things which is going to happen. And as per my experience so far, I've seen CAPE is an continuous access evaluation and policy enforcement, right? That we can do using conditional access policy and enforce those policy controls and everything on the devices, applications, user identities, and everything together. But still, that is something which is going to be more matured than the current state, right? So what's the agenda? So what is SSF? What is CAPE? And how SSF and CAPE works together? And for the diagrams, I have not created it, but yeah, definitely there are some of the diagrams as well. And towards the end of this, so it's a real world example that I'm going to talk and takeaways, right? So this is going to be a very short video with all of these topics only. And I just wanted to make sure you understand it, you learn about it and what is it. And going forward, you would see SSF is being integrated with Microsoft Cloud System. And that's not the immediate or now, but definitely it's going to happen because we are seeing that so many companies and organizations are adopting zero trust framework and they are building from scratch, right? So there are different use cases, different scenarios, how each organization is going to adopt it and then deploy it and implement across the organizations and as per their needs, right? It is not a kind of one-way solution. It is kind of a solution which is going to be different for each organizations as per their needs and requirements, right? So let's talk about each of these one by one, right? So what is SSF? It's a sign-in signal framework, right? As I said, so this framework is going to gather and evaluate signals during sign-in process from the users, right? So it's going to check each and every signals which is coming out, coming in and out from the end users to the Entra ID in Entra ID context, right? And how that is going to check and evaluate it, right? And the purpose of this is to enable intelligent risk-based access decisions. Why? Because within the Entra ID, we have conditional access policies, which are risk-based and conditional access policies as well, right? And that's a part of identity governance, right? But or identity protection, not governance, but still, those are the policies which would be bring into the sign-in signal framework and is going to make sure the devices and identities and access levels basis on all of these different signals you can see here, which includes device compliance status, user locations, user and sign-in risks, MFA requirements, and application sensitivity, along with the different outcomes, whether we are going to allow access or block or requiring additional verifications in order to let user get into the systems and access those, right? So this is all about SSF, which is sign-in signal framework. And then next is what is CAPE, right? So you might have used already, which is conditional access evaluation, right? So that's a CAE, but CAPE is something which is kind of another version or another layer of conditional access evaluation, which is continuous access policy enforcement, right? And this is going to enforce access policies in real time and even on the mid session as well. So mid session is going to be something when user is logged into the system and accessing application and it's being used actively, but still evaluation is going to happen, right? So evaluation is going to happen and make sure that user is appropriately logged into the right set of devices, right set of applications with the right set of identity, right? And then whether that access token is active, whether we should keep it or it's something we can simply make sure if there is kind of a risk based on, as I said, or as I showed in the previous slide, whether the user is logging in from non-compliant device, whether the user does not provide additional information to access that resource, whether user's location is not allowed to access any of those resources, and all of those are the different triggers to it, right? So purpose of this is going to be ensuring adaptive and always on security beyond login. It's not during and before the login, but it is going to be beyond login as well, and a kind of continuous access evaluation to keep the evaluating access levels on the each and every scenario and situations, right? For example, these are the triggers where you can see re-evaluation is going to happen always, where user has changed passwords or password changes, then user revocation, then MFA status updates, then conditional access policy updates. So these are the few triggers, right? There are so many different triggers which happens on each and every different workloads levels. And the simple terms and example you can see, which is going to be with conditional access evaluation. And that's something which we have already seen and many different use cases are there for us to go ahead and see and use it, right? So this way, which is going to be provided and we can use it, right? So let's look at some other topics here. So how SSF and CAPE works together, right? So you might be wondering why or what is the interaction between both and how those works together. So SSF evaluates signals at sign-in, right? And then the next layer of this is going to be CAPE, right? Which is continuous access policy enforcement, which is going to keep rechecking the session post sign-ins and mid sessions as well, right? So once user has logged into the application device and systems or any of the application which is integrated with identity access management solution, right? And then how they work together, right? So together they strengthen the zero trust architecture framework. As I said, this is going to add additional layer and value to the zero trust architecture as well, and adapt to changing users and device risk in real time. That means it's going to help us to keep evaluating users' identities before, after, and mid session as well. So before is going to when user tries to access particular access application URL, and then user enters the credentials to get into the system, right? Then once the user is in the system, then there is a mid session activity which is going to keep checking the tokens and the user activities and everything together, and evaluation is going to happen, right? And the post is going to be either user is trying to access any resources from the any location, be it managed device and managed devices, or it's a simple kind of open network over the internet from any public location, right? And it's going to check each and every endpoint and evaluate that process in the backend and enforce the right set of policies that we are going to create and deploy across, right? And then it is going to make the decision either the user should be allowed to access, block, or needs an additional verification whether that's the right person, the right user who they say are to access that respective resource and applications and whatever it is, right? So that way we can enforce it, or the policy is going to be enforced. Let's go to the next slide here. So this is going to be the real world example, right? So what are the scenario, or what's the scenario? So I have taken one simple example here. Let's say user John logs in from his office laptop, right? Office laptop, as an obviously it's going to be a managed laptop. Either it could be from Intune or from any other solutions, kind of SCCM or a hybrid environment. Then SSF access or SSF allows access after checking device compliance and MFA. Why? Because that's going to happen during the before sign-in process. Before sign-in, including user enters the credentials or user opens up the URL, and then it's user enters the credentials, and credentials are verified with the respective identity, and it also checks whether the user has set up MFA and then device is compliant. That's the one of the use case, but there are so many different scenarios where we can enforce the SSF is going to be verified and checked during that process. And once the user is logged in, that's going to be the mid session where device becomes non-compliant due to missing any patches or any other policy which is not allowing users or devices to be met the compliance requirements, right? Or there is a conflict between different policies and something like that. So even that situation also, it is going to be considered as user is or the device is not compliant and user won't be able to access right set of resources, and that's something user has to make sure the device should have right patches, user should reboot the device after a particular period, or all of that different things, right? Then CAPE invalidates the token and forces a re-authentication. So what does that mean is when device goes non-compliant or any other situations like policy conflict or something like that, then CAPE is going to come into the picture and do its evaluation, right? So it's going to evaluate each and every conditions and then make sure whether user should be able to access any resources, application, any data, whatever it is. So depending on the policy enforcement that we are enforcing, along with the applications and right set of workloads that we are going to allow them to access and make sure they are allowing or whether they are allowed or blocked or they need to provide additional authentication mechanisms to prove they are the right set of users, they are the right set of persons or right identity to access that respective workload, right? So this way it's going to be enforce it one, right? So this is the real world example or real scenario, I would say. There are many different scenarios. You can go through it and collect it, and probably you can see the experience as well. So I have just taken 3 or 4 steps here in this real world scenario example. And it totally depends on how we are going to enforce and target the access levels and application deployments and controlling those resources across the organization in the context of identity access management with SSF and CAPE, right? And towards the end of this is going to be a takeaways, right? So what are the takeaways here, right? So there are takeaways, which is, let's say, SSF is going to help make a smart and signal-based decisions at the login phase, right? So when user enters the credentials and logins, and if user is logging into the device or applications from any locations, and if that is allowed as per the policy, then user is able to get into the system. Otherwise, it's going to make decisions to block that access, which is not allowed. Let's say there's a user who is accessing an application from home network, then that is not allowed. Simply users should be able to, or users should be blocked, right? Because we don't want users access any of the business systems or applications from home network. If they can, or if they wanted to access, either they can access through the corporate network using VPN or any other solution. If that is allowed, again, depends on the requirements, how we wanted to provide the access levels, right? And if not, then we are going to enforce this decision-making process during the sign-in, and then this policy is going to kick in, right? So once the user logged in on the mid session or during the session is active, where it's going to keep the session security checks, right? Using the CAPE. So it's going to keep checking beyond the login and enforce the real-time policy checks and changes on the user identity as well as applications, and user has access to it, but this policy is going to keep checking and evaluate user access levels, right? And both of these are the essential part of zero trust and modern IAM systems, as I said, right? And both Microsoft Entra uses both extensively to improve security posture, right? And SSF is something which is going to be more mature as it is currently in the Entra context, but definitely there are so many different scenarios as well as different use cases. Those would come up, and we would see more maturity, and we would see different levels of configurations and different things around it, right? So these are the takeaways around it, and so that's it. And if you have any questions, anything you wanted to ask, and I would be able to help there and answer all those questions, right? So that's all for this video. Let me know if you have any questions, any doubts, anything that you wanted to ask and know something about it. And also you can share your feedback. If you have used it, you have seen different scenarios, if you have worked on these kind of implementations and use cases before, and it would be great to work and collaborate on that as well. So yeah, that's all for this video. Don't forget to like, share this video with your friends and colleagues and whoever needs to see and watch. And also subscribe to the channel so that you can learn more about different topics that I post regularly, and you would be learning new things every day. So that's something, it keeps us up and to the new topics every time, and it's going to help us to improve more on our learnings and experiences, right? So yeah, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.